Hello, everyone, and welcome to Coffee Talk. And Coffee Talk is a podcast by Callstack in which we drink coffee and we talk. I have a coffee. Ola has a coffee.
I do.
And in this episode, I invited Ola to join me because Ola, I don't know if you remember, but in January, we had an episode of the React Native Show podcast in which we discussed the last year React Native news. Do you remember that?
Yeah, definitely. That was fun.
Yeah. So you probably also remember that like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, we did a podcast, the Coffee Talk podcast, in which we discussed the latest news from React and React Native space.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So my working title for this one is how do you even news, and news as a verb there. How do you consume your news? How do you categorize it? What's there to know? And I want this to be like the knowledge compendium so that everyone can be as experienced, as well read as you are. And as I am, I'm consider myself quite well read in the latest news.
Sure. For sure. And it's a vast topic. So I hope we can give a nice overview of our sources.
Yeah, like a few days ago, you mentioned to me that you get these questions all the time. You get this question a lot. How do you find your sources?
Yeah.
Okay, so my idea for this episode is to divide our news into two separate categories. And I know that your categories are a bit different than mine. So let me go first, and then we'll listen about how you divide your news. And my definition, my division is I have the headlines and I have the deep dives. So the headlines, I go like probably 2-3 times a day. I get some notification and I read the headlines. And that accomplishes a lot, actually, because then I have this general idea that something came out, that something is going on. And the deep dives, I need some time to deep dive into some news source and like really read about it.
And do you get a lot of notifications?
We'll get to that. Okay. But yeah, like, I don't know, about news, 10 a day.
Oh my God.
Probably. But that includes also our Discord, in which our developers post some small pieces of information, some small headlines.
I get pretty stressed when I get notifications on my phone. Like, I'm one of those inbox zero people where if I have notifications at the top of my phone, I'm unhappy. So I avoid notifications in all shapes and forms. And when we spoke about getting the news, as you mentioned, I thought in different categories. I kind of thought of how someone who is new to the field would research news, and someone who is like seasoned and already knows a lot. They may look for different sorts of news.
So let's keep that perspective in mind as well, and maybe we can add to our like news sources. We can add to which bucket we should put this category in. Is it a noob or is it like a pro?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I'm thinking let's go over the spectrum and start from the headlines. And let me tell you a story how 2 years ago I started my other podcast, the Devspresso JS News. This is a podcast in Polish when me and my friends, we're discussing the like front-end news, the JavaScript side of things. At that time, I have subscribed to 10 or 15 different newsletters, different email newsletters. And that's where my notification comes from in the first place. So I get an email almost every day with some like a news source. Yeah. So I get the
is it very repetitive, or is it always like all of it is kind of new, or is it like 10 newsletters on the same thing?
They do overlap just because like the subject matter is really concise to not only React but to JavaScript and to front end. So
Okay.
I get like the React Native newsletter from Infinite Red, which is awesome. I like that.
Yeah.
And fun thing is that we are mentioned there sometimes. We, like a Callstack, we are mentioned
Yeah.
there, not me personally.
Yeah.
I get Tyler from ui.dev, and this one is really funny and I like reading it. And I guess in this one they have a riddle every week. So you have this like JavaScript question and it is answered at the bottom of the newsletter. So it is stuff like a fun thing to do while reading this newsletter.
Yeah.
And I have JavaScript Weekly, obviously. And I have some other React, Node, other newsletters.
So you mentioned the one with the riddle, and the one newsletter I do read is Cassidy Williams's newsletter, and she also has a riddle, but it's like she asks the riddle and she like it's answered in the next week only. Like you can answer, and then if you would like the fun part is if you answered, you're mentioned in the next newsletter that you answered. So that's kind of like a moment
awesome.
to be proud.
This creates like a nice continuity, and you want to read the next one just to see if you got it right. So, but the problem with the newsletters I found after doing my other podcast for a year or so is that the news there are at least 1 week old. Not at least, but around 1 week old. So then I met you last year, sometime last year, and you introduced me to this amazing platform that just got bought by Elon Musk. And when I went there, I found out that if I follow the right people, I follow the right news, I can actually put some news on my podcast before I get them in my email inbox.
Yeah, Twitter is definitely like the fastest way the news travel in the technical world. So it's a good place to be if you want to be really like on the bleeding edge, and especially since you are a podcast author and you do want to be on the bleeding edge and you want to be the first to talk about stuff. So Twitter is a good source, but it's often tough to find the people who are good to follow because not everybody talks about code. I would, for anybody who's starting off like using Twitter, I would say start by following big organizations like React or React Native or Callstack or Next or Vercel. Yeah, Callstack is a very good account to follow. And if you have products that you like, I don't know if you like Mac or iPhones or whatever, VS Code, then you go ahead and follow those accounts. And you'll get all sorts of news about those products, and it's cool.
Yeah, you can also follow the whole lists, right? So there is this last week in React, something by Sebastien, which last name I cannot pronounce, sorry, but this one is great, and it also has a newsletter which I have, but the Twitter account is faster somehow.
Yeah, it is. Lists. You can make your own lists, or you can like get in on public lists. So that's. But it can be stressful. Like Twitter can be stressful because there's a lot of like people fighting about anything. I remember like one of the first times I wrote something that was like just my opinion. It was something that I said communism was bad, and then I had like 30 people replying to me that no, you're wrong. So I have to be careful about that. But going back to the technical side of stuff, once you're following all sorts of organizations and products that you like, a few people that I would recommend to follow. That's first of all Dan Abramov, because he tweets a lot about code, not all the time, but he does tweet a lot about code. Lorenzo Sciandra, he's at Callstack. I can't remember that he works still at Meta or he doesn't. Okay, sorry about that. I had to change rooms real quick. So going back to the Twitter scene and Twitterverse, Lorenzo Sciandra, he's at Callstack on Twitter, and he works at Microsoft. Another person that I follow and I like following is Rick Hanloni. He works at Meta, I'm pretty sure. Then you have Cassidy Williams that I already mentioned, that she does the newsletter, but she's also pretty active on Twitter, and she does so many memes. Like, she does video memes, and it's hilarious.
Sorry, I have to interrupt. I love memes accounts. Like, I think I started from it. I started getting interested in news because I saw memes on Instagram and on Twitter and on Facebook. Programming memes are so good. And that's how I got to know Ben Awad from YouTube, because he did like this memes reviews or something like that.
He did do that, but Ben Awad has like a long history of content, and it's like he starts a lot of companies. I guess he starts a lot of products, and I love following him for that. He has one actual app for recipes that I use, and it's a good app. And then he went off creating stuff like he created a plugin for VS Code.
Yes.
Which was
like Tinder for
like Tinder for VS Code, yeah. And then he sold it for $10,000.
Yes,
and then he was like creating other stuff and games, and he's always up to creating products. And a lot of I noticed that a lot of people are criticizing him that he's like starting something new all the time, but I love it. I love that he shows how he's doing it, how like he's walking through the whole process of creating something new. But that's more on YouTube than on Twitter.
Yeah.
So we'll circle back to that. And going back to Twitter, as I said, Cassidy Williams, she has a lot of awesome memes. Then you have people like Evan Bacon from Expo, and he tweets a lot simply about Expo. So that's always like you get to know everything that's going on. Who else? We have I follow Kadi Kraman, and she's a speaker. She's the head of mobile application services at Formidable Labs, and as far as I know, she got promoted not too long ago. So congratulations, Kadi. And speaking of promotions, I also follow on Twitter Michal, our own head of technology here at Callstack. He tweets interesting stuff as well. So
Michal is actually one of my sources of news. To be honest, he's the most active on our Discord channel, Developer Links.
Yeah, that's true.
He posts like, I don't know, 10 new links a day. Out of like 15 total on this channel, 2/3 is his.
Yeah. So he's a very good source of information.
Yeah.
So if you ever come work here at Callstack with us, you can forget like Twitter and everything we're talking about. Just read what Michal posts on our Discord channel, and you'll be golden.
Yeah.
A couple more people I do follow on Twitter are like Kent C. Dodds, and he's known for React Testing Library, and Wes Boss, who does great tutorials on JavaScript and React, and Ryan Florence, he's the creator of React Router, and Michael Jackson, and like the three of them, Kent C. Dodds, Ryan Florence.
What's the last one?
Michael Jackson. As like he says on Twitter, he's the least Googleable person, because you just can't Google him. He's safe. He doesn't even have to worry about his emails and stuff. They recently created Remix, so they tweet a lot about Remix, and it's pretty fun to read as well. Like, they are not only coding, but they are like spinning up this whole company, and they're facing their challenges and talking about them. And like one last point I would love to make about Twitter is like I mentioned first, that Twitter can be tiring because people are very negative, and people in the technology space, they tend to tweet about the same thing. Like, if React 18 is out. Like everybody's just tweeting about React 18, and it's kind of, it's repetitive. It's very often negative because it's easier to criticize somebody than to create something, right? So I recommend following not only people in the technology space. Like I follow writers, or I follow just like random people that I like, I don't know, actors. And that kind of opens up your Twitter experience to not only, reading about React 18, because that's not the only thing in the world.
Yeah, so like the last person I want to mention that I follow on Twitter, I don't follow many people, but I do follow Jamon Holmgren from Infinite Red and from React Native Show. Sorry, from React Native Radio. The React Native Show is ours.
Yeah.
The React Native Radio is Jamon, and I do follow him, and I do listen to his podcast. And the podcast is the other category that we should go on with. So podcasts.
Podcast, yeah.
Like podcasts are different kind of animal, because like in Twitter you have like constant flow of news with small bites, right?
Yeah.
It's the newest from the newest. The emails you have like aggregated news once a week per newsletter, stuff like that. But podcasts are a different kind of animal. They don't come out usually in set period of time. Like the React Native Radio, they do like an episode every second week or something like that. Yeah. We do an episode the main channel of the React Native Show podcast, we do like every other month. With the Coffee Talk, we try to do every second week. Let's see how that's going to go.
Yeah, but like the main podcast for React Native Show, that's the deep dive. That's like getting your hands dirty, right? And on the Coffee Talk, we try to keep it more loose. So podcasts can give you whatever you need. If you want to have deep dive or not, just choose the right podcast.
Yeah, and what's great about podcasts and podcasting is that you can listen to them on the train and walking with your dog and stuff like that. So that's why I do them, and that's why I like them.
Yeah. And that's why I invite you also to go ahead and listen to React Native Show and Łukasz's Devspresso.
Yes,
Łukasz's, that's like a difficult way to say your name.
If you're Polish if you speak Polish and not even speak, if you understand Polish, go check out my other podcast, Devspresso JS News.
Yeah.
And definitely stick around with our Coffee Talks. We're gonna have more of those in the future. Yeah. Let's move on from podcasts. Another one of the spectrum from headlines to deep dives, I think it's YouTube. And YouTube is like a one step above podcast because you can include some graphics in them, right? So actually our main channel, the React Native Show podcast, might be in the YouTube category because we sometimes we do focus on the visuals on that channel.
Yeah.
So apart from the React Native Show podcast, like on our Callstack Engineers channel, you can watch all of our conferences talks and like our discussion panel that we held last year.
Yeah.
Apart from that, who I follow on YouTube, we already discussed, is Ben Awad.
Yeah.
He's great. And also Fireship.io. Fireship.io is a channel that started from creating this 100 seconds video about one topic, Redux, Remix, React, all the R's, Rust. And he's explaining this subject in 100 seconds or less. But now he's also have like some, I think it's called the Tech Report or something, when he goes over the latest news. Okay, that was YouTube. And
I would love to add William Kadi on, because he's a great watch for all React Native aficionados. I guess he talks about animations mostly, but it's a really good source for deep dives and for like people who know a little bit about the topic already.
Yeah, and he's doing like tutorials mixed with live coding, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's awesome. Like, I love his creations.
Yeah, that's super impressive.
So, going back like 3-4 years, I feel like there was this huge thing called Medium.
Yeah,
And I feel
it
like
still exists. We just don't go there anymore, I
I
guess.
don't. Uh,
Yeah, I have like
Medium.
I have a couple of articles that I go back to, but I don't like I do still receive the newsletter from Medium, but it seems like mostly buzzwords and pseudo psychology stuff. So I hardly ever click it. I don't know. Maybe I subscribe to wrong channels or something. I don't know.
Yeah, Medium was never about news for me. It was more about deep dives, and
Yeah,
like the good practices don't die out in a month or anything like that. So the blog posts from like 4 years ago are
still good.
mostly
Yeah,
still good, still
yeah,
accurate, right?
yeah,
Like performance in React or something. It's
yeah,
still valid.
yeah.
So
Same thing on dev.to. There's like a few articles that were written like a year or 2 years ago that I still go back to, but I don't need any additions to them.
but
They're
from what
still
I
there.
heard, more and more companies are ditching Medium, and
Yeah,
also our marketing department is no longer publishing there.
yeah, exactly. So that's telling.
Yeah, another step down the ladder
Yeah,
from
deeper and deeper.
headlines. Yeah, from headlines to deep dives. I love watching conferences. Like
Yeah,
I do that all the time. Uh when I wash my dishes, when I clean my apartment or anything like that, I always turn on some talk from React, from React Native, from like Redux, and I try
yeah.
to. It's not about the news again. It's about the experience from the more experienced developers who are approaching some subject different way than I would do.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like you can get inspired. Like conferences are not there for you to write actual piece of code, but like inspire you and show you what you can do with your skills or with your code.
Yeah, so I obviously watch React Native EU, our conference.
Yeah.
What other conferences are there that
Oh,
we should follow, we should watch?
I do like React Conf, like the official React conference, and there's also Chain React, which we all miss, and we hope that it's going to come back soon.
Yeah.
And React Summit, and there's going to be a live event for the React Summit this year in Amsterdam. And when I see the headliner, like the people who are going to be there to talk, I feel like it's going to be like the biggest meetup of the biggest names that I know from Twitter, and they're going to be there together for the first time since the pandemic started. So I think that's going to be like a huge event this June in Amsterdam.
Yeah. There is also Chain React. Did you mention that?
Yeah. I said
Yeah.
Chain
Okay.
React. We miss
Sorry.
you.
Sorry.
That's okay. I talk fast.
Yep. There are many more conferences. Like I watch Next.js
Yeah,
conferences and like Remix
yeah.
conferences and stuff like that. But I'm not sure. I'm not even sure
There's
that
many more.
Remix had a conference yet. But if they will have one, I'm gonna watch it.
Yeah.
Moving on from conferences to even more advanced subjects. I feel
Yeah.
like you have something to say in that area.
Yeah. I saw this tweet the other day that you know you're really comfortable with the technology when you get excited about release notes. And then that's something I noticed happened for me about React and React Native, that I don't need some pretty article on Medium. I go there and like I'm reading the release notes and I'm like, oh wow, they're adding this or that. And when you get to a point when you have some experience in a technology, that's like a good sign to know that you're pretty much advanced when you get excited about the release notes.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
also like if you like some repositories, you can always like mark some discussion that you want to observe, and you get like email notifications. Or
yeah,
if you were active in some discussion, I was at some point in one of the libraries. I get notifications until now that there is like a new post in this issue discussion or
yeah.
something.
And React Native has a whole, I think it's like a special repo for discussions, which is open. and everybody can just read the discussions or post a discussion or a question on the repo, and that's pretty good. But that's a lot of content. Like you need to have a lot of time to go through all that.
Yeah, and on the same subject, I got recently added to official Discord for React Native community. I guess you were
Me
too as
too.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mike Pierzchala, for adding all of us.
Yes.
But again, like
It's a big
amount
honor.
of discussions there, it's overwhelming. And like I feel like I've read some messages 2 weeks ago, but from that time I didn't have time to to actually catch up, and the whole board is red for me because I have so many unread conversations.
Yeah, it's pretty focused. Like you have channels specifically for Fabric or for Hermes, and the topics that are mentioned there are very, very specific. But it's awesome to look at all the people who are in the channel to how they work out all the problems that they face.
Yeah, so I guess that was our deepest deep divest source of information. So let's summarize, let's catch up with what we've been discussing in this episode, maybe from bottom up, some from the deep dive. So we discussed the Discord channels, working groups, then some less deep dive is GitHub, if you believe that. Then we have talks from conferences. Then that
and
already.
If I can interject, like even if you're very new to any technology, watching conferences is an awesome source to get your news and all sorts of information.
Yeah, one up on the ladder is blogs and like Medium, Devto, etc. Up is YouTube. Then we discussed some podcasts. Then there is like Twitter with all of its news and topics. And then we had old school email newsletters.
Yeah, that's a good overview. I feel like we covered a lot of ground.
We're gonna put all of those sources in the show notes. I'm Łukasz Chludziński, React Native developer at Callstack. With me,
Ola Desmuslinjaska. Thank you.
Yes, you can find us on Twitter as well. Please listen to this podcast, Coffee Talks, and listen to our main channel, the React Native Show podcast. We also have a React Native EU conference. We have our blog. We have our Twitter. We have our YouTube account. So I guess like we cover all of the spectrum. Like the Callstack news sources cover all of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining
whatever
me.
You need, we're here for you.
Yeah, we have that. Thanks so much, Ola, for joining me. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and hear you next time. Bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye.